The Coleman propane heater clicked on at 4:30 like always, which meant I'd been awake for an hour already. 43 years old, and my bladder runs my life now. One more thing the divorce lawyer didn't mention when she was dividing up everything else. The houseboat rocked gentle on its mooring lines, that rhythm I'd gotten used to after 18 months of living on the water. Cheaper than an apartment, I told myself. More freedom. Really, it was because Denise got the house in Alton and I got the '08 Silverado with the bad transmission, and this floating tin I bought off a guy in Grafton who was dying of emphysema. Through the window, single pane, desperately needed replacing before winter really hit. I could see Trevor's John boat tied up next to mine. 17 years old, and he still came out here every other weekend per the custody arrangement, even though he could have said no by now. Maybe he felt sorry for me. Maybe he liked the fishing. Didn't matter. Having him here was the only thing that kept me from thinking too hard about where 43 years had gone and why I was replacing bilge pumps instead of coaching his baseball games like I used to imagine I would. I sell parts for towboats. Been doing it since I was 25. Not exactly glamorous. Mostly it's warehouse work, inventory sheets, talking to captains who need a fuel injector for a 671 Detroit or a starter motor for a Cat 3406. Sometimes I ride along on deliveries downriver, which is how I got to know the water. The Mississippi's not romantic when you work on it. It's brown, it stinks like diesel and dead fish, and it'll kill you 6 different ways if you're not careful. But it pays. And after the divorce, I needed every commission I could scrape. The radio on the galley counter was playing that morning show Trevor liked, the one where they prank call people. He'd left on last night. Kid never turned anything off, lights, TV, his damn phone charger. Just like his mother that way, though I'd learned not to say that out loud anymore. I put the Mr. Coffee on, generic Kroger brand, because I couldn't afford the Folgers anymore, another thing I didn't mention to Trevor. And checked my phone. 3 texts from dispatch. That was unusual for Saturday. Call me. Emergency. All crews south of Chain of Rocks being contacted. Barge accident at mile 195. Chemical spill. Mile 195 was south of St. Louis, maybe 80 miles upriver from where I was moored near Brussels. I called Jerry, our dispatcher, who sounded like he'd been up all night. They're saying don't drink the water, he told me. His voice had that thin quality he got when he was chain smoking. Some kind of industrial barge flipped near Herculaneum. Whole load went in. What was it carrying? That's the thing, they won't say. Just hazardous materials. EPA's going apeshit, Coast Guard's shutting down traffic. You got river water in your tank. I looked at the pipes under my sink. The houseboat had a freshwater tank I filled from the marina pump, but I've been meaning to top it off for 3 days now. Currently running maybe a quarter full. Some, not much. Don't use it. They're bringing bottled water to the marinas. Should be there by noon. How bad is it? Bad enough they're evacuating St. Genevieve. He coughed, wet and nasty. Look, just sit tight. Don't go out on the water. Don't let your boy touch anything. I hung up and stared at the river through the window. Looked normal enough. Same muddy brown it always was. Early morning mist hanging low. A wing dam broke the current about 50 yards out, creating that slick water where the crappie like to hold. I've been planning to take Trevor out there today. The bedroom door opened and Trevor shuffled out, wearing the oversized Grizzlies hoodie he practically lived in, hair sticking up like he'd been electrocuted. He had Denise's eyes, green like new spring leaves, and my unfortunate nose. 17, but still gangly, all knees and elbows, growing into a frame that would probably be bigger than mine. Dad, he squinted at me. Why are you up? Something happened upriver. Chemical spill. They're saying not to use the water. He processed this with the speed of someone still half asleep. Like to drink. To anything. Dispatch called. Said to sit tight. But we were going to fish. He said it flat, not whining. That was worse somehow. The disappointment without complaint. I know, bud. Maybe tomorrow if they clear it. He nodded and went to the sink, reaching for the faucet. I caught his wrist. Seriously, don't touch it. I was just gonna wash my face. Use bottled water. There's some left from last week. He gave me that look, the one that said I was overreacting, being paranoid like always. Like when I wouldn't let him go to that party in Jerseyville because I'd heard the kid's parents would be gone. Like when I made him wear a life jacket even though he'd been swimming since he was 6. Denise always said I smothered him. Maybe she was right, but he was still here, still breathing, still mine 2 weekends a month, and I'd be damned if I'd lose that over some teenage eye roll. The radio cut to a news update. A woman's voice, professionally calm, but with an edge underneath. Confirmed now, the barge that overturned near Herculaneum was carrying experimental industrial solvents. Residents within 5 miles of the Mississippi River are advised to avoid all contact with river water until further notice. The EPA has classified this as a Category 3 hazardous material incident. Emergency services are. Static swallowed the rest. Experimental, Trevor said. That's not good. No, it's not. I try my cell again. Signal was shit out here, always have been, but I managed to load a news site. The article was thin on details. Late Friday night, crew survived, containment efforts underway. No mention of what the hell experimental industrial solvents actually meant. I scrolled down to comments and immediately regretted it. Conspiracy theories, people claiming government cover-up, someone insisting they saw the barge deliberately capsized. Internet expertise at its finest. Dad. Trevor was at the window, pointing. There was a boat moving upriver, running hard against the current. A little 14-foot aluminum john, the kind every fisherman on the Mississippi has. But it was moving wrong, jerky, listing to one side. And the person at the tiller wasn't sitting. They were standing, back rigid, face forward. Even from 100 yards, I could tell something was off about the posture. Too stiff, like a mannequin. That's Bobby Krause's boat, Trevor said. He was right. I recognized the faded red stripe. Bobby lived 3 houseboats down, a retired Corps of Engineers guy who spent most of his time drinking Busch Light and complaining about the government. Nice enough when he was sober. I bought that Coleman heater from him. Actually, he'd given me a good price, said he was cleaning out his garage. The boat kept coming, motor screaming. It was headed straight for the mooring docks. He's gonna hit, Trevor said. I was already moving, grabbing my jacket. Stay here. Dad. I mean it, Trevor. Stay inside. I went out onto the deck, just as Bobby's boat slammed into the dock piling. The aluminum crumpled, the motor kicked up out of the water, and Bobby, if that was Bobby, didn't react at all. Just stood there, swaying with the impact, water streaming off his clothes. His clothes. They were soaked, completely drenched, like he'd been swimming. Bobby, I called out. You okay? He turned toward my voice, and that's when I saw his face. His eyes were open, but completely black. Not the pupils, the whole eye, sclera and all, black as river mud. And his mouth was open too, wider than a mouth should open, and water was pouring out. Not dribbling, pouring, like someone had left a faucet running inside his skull. The boat was taking on water, fast through the crumpled bow. Bobby didn't seem to notice. He just stood there, swaying, water streaming from his mouth, his nose, his eyes. Jesus Christ, water was coming from his eyes, and then he stepped over the gunwale into the river. He didn't swim. He walked, stepped off the boat into 8 feet of water, and just kept walking, disappearing beneath the surface like he was descending stairs. I stood there frozen, hand on the mooring line, watching the spot where he'd gone under. The water rippled outward in concentric circles. His boat gurgled and slipped beneath the surface, motors still running, the sound dopplering down into nothing. Dad! Trevor was behind me. I told him to stay inside. Of course, he hadn't listened. 17 years old, and he still thought he was invincible, still thought his old man didn't know anything. "Get inside," I said. My voice came out strange, too high. "Right now. Get inside and lock the door." "What happened to?" "Now, Trevor." He went. I heard the door slam, the bolt slide home. Good kid. When I really needed him to listen, he did. I looked back at the water. Nothing. Just a river, flowing south like always, carrying whatever the fuck had been in that barge, carrying it past St. Louis, past Alton, past every town and houseboat and marina from here to New Orleans. My phone buzzed. Text from Jerry. "Get off the river. All houseboats evacuating. National Guard coming." I looked at the water tank gauge on the side of my cabin. Quarter full, maybe 20 gallons. We both brushed our teeth last night with that water. Washed our hands. I made coffee with it this morning. Most of the pot was still sitting on the counter, steam rising. Trevor's voice came through the door, muffled. "Dad, the radio." I went back inside. The radio was spitting static, voices cutting in and out. "Confirmed cases in St. Genevieve. Do not approach anyone who has been in respiratory systems completely, walking into the river." "We need to leave," Trevor said. He'd gone pale, freckles standing out across his nose like paint spatter. "Right now, Dad, we need to leave." He was right. Of course he was right. But my truck was parked at the marina, a quarter mile up the access road, and between here and there was that road and the river on both sides and Bobby Kraus walking along the bottom with his eyes full of mud. I grabbed the keys. "Get your stuff. Only what you can carry. We're going." The access road was gravel, badly rutted from spring floods that had never been properly repaired. My Silverado was parked in the marina, lot along with maybe 15 other vehicles, mostly trucks and a few cars that had seen better decades. The lot sat on a little rise, maybe 10 feet above the river, which I'd always thought was plenty of clearance until right now, when it felt like we were camped on a diving board. Trevor threw his backpack in the truck bed, too hard, the kind of throw that meant he was scared and trying not to show it. I didn't blame him. I was scared too, the kind of scare that starts in your stomach and radiates outward until your fingers go numb and you can't quite catch your breath. The kind I used to get before basketball games in high school, before I'd met Denise, before I'd learned that most things you're scared of never actually happen. Except this was happening. The marina was chaos. People loading boats onto trailers, engines revving, someone's dog barking nonstop. Tina Kowalski, no, shit, Tina Henderson now, she'd remarried last year, was dragging a cooler toward her car, moving fast, her face the color of old newspaper. She saw me and changed direction. "Glenn," she said, "you here?" "Bobby Kraus," I said. "Just saw him walk into the river." "Jesus." She wiped her face with her forearm. "Jesus Christ." They're saying it's in the water. Whatever that barge was carrying, it's in the water, and if you drink it. I know. Eddie's still out there. She met her teenage son, not her new husband. He went fishing with a Paulson boy at 5 this morning. I can't reach him. His phone just rings. Where'd they go? Pike Island. He said Pike Island. That was 4 miles downriver, for miles of water that had been flowing downstream from that spill for, I checked my watch, almost 8 hours now. "I'm sure they're fine," I said, and it sounded hollow even to me. "They probably don't have signal." "Yeah." Her eyes were wet. "Yeah, probably." She went back to loading her car. I watched her go, thinking about Eddie Henderson, 16 years old, good kid, played first base. Thinking about the current and the dilution rate and how long it would take for whatever was in that barge to reach Pike Island. Probably already had. Trevor was in the truck, window down. "Dad, we need to go." "I know, bud." I climbed in, turned the key. The engine coughed, died. I tried again. Same thing. No, no, no," I muttered, pumping the gas. "Come on, you piece of..." It caught on the third try, running rough but running. The transmission had been slipping for 6 months. I'd been meaning to get it looked at. Added to the list of things I'd been meaning to do. Right after repair the water tank and fix the deck railing and be a better father. Behind us, someone screamed. I looked in the rear view. A woman, couldn't see who, was backing away from the water's edge. No, not backing, running. And behind her, climbing up the boat ramp, was a man in waders. He moved in that same stiff, jerky way Bobby had, water pouring from his mouth. Go, Dad. I threw it in reverse, then drive, gravel spraying. The truck fishtailed, caught traction. I could see the man in waders in my mirror, still coming, moving faster than anyone should be able to move with a gut full of river water. The access road snaked through bottomland, cottonwoods on both sides. Normally, it was pretty out here in a bleak sort of way. I'd always liked how quiet it was, how the trees filtered the light into something soft and green. Now, every shadow looked wrong. Every gap in the trees felt like something waiting. Is he following us? Trevor had twisted around in his seat, looking back. Don't see him. What the fuck was that? I didn't correct his language. Didn't seem like the time. My phone rang. Jerry again. I put on speaker. Where are you? He said. Access road. Heading to the highway. Don't go into town. They've got roadblocks up. National Guards evacuating everyone north of River Mile 180. Where the hell are we supposed to go? Inland. Away from the water. They're setting up shelters in. Static ate the rest. Jerry? Jerry! The line was dead. Route 79 ran along the river, hugging the bluffs. I could see the water through the trees, brown and placid, reflecting the overcast sky. A tow was parked mid-river, 15 barges pushed up, not moving, just sitting there. That was wrong. Tows don't stop unless something's seriously fucked. Current's too strong, river's too narrow. You keep moving or you lose control. Dad, look. Trevor was pointing at the tow. There were people on the barges. Lots of people, just standing there, lined up along the edges like they were waiting for something. I slowed down. Shouldn't have, but I did. Through the trees, I could make out maybe 20 figures, all facing the same direction. Toward the shore. Toward us. Then one of them stepped off the barge. They didn't fall. They just walked right off the edge into the water. Another followed. Then another. Like they were disembarking at a dock. Except there was no dock, just the river, and they were walking into it the same way Bobby had walked into it, disappearing beneath the surface. Jesus Christ, I whispered. Trevor grabbed my arm. Dad, we need to move. I hit the gas. The transmission slipped, caught, slipped again. The truck lurched forward. Come on, I said. Come on, you. It caught. We were moving. The radio was still on, cycling through static and fragments. Do not drink tap water. Estimated exposure time between ingestion and CDC has deployed. Symptoms include black discoloration of the eyes and... I switched it off. Are we gonna die? Trevor asked. No, you don't know that. We didn't drink the water. We're fine. You made coffee this morning. He was right. I made coffee with the tank water. Half a pot, sitting on the counter, and I'd had, what, a cup, maybe a cup and a half. That was before it got here, I said. The spill was upriver. It takes time to travel downstream. How much time? I don't know. Hours. A day, maybe. It happened Friday night, Dad. It's Saturday morning. That's not hours. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. He had Denise's brains, thank God. My contribution was a stubbornness and a bad back. We passed through Brussels, or what used to be Brussels before the flood of '93 made half of it unlivable. Few houses, a gas station, a bar that was probably a front for something else. The gas station parking lot was packed, people filling containers with gas, water, anything they could carry. A woman was loading cases of bottled water into a minivan, moving with that jerky desperation that meant she was about to snap. I pulled in. We needed supplies. Stay in the truck, I told Trevor. Dad, I mean it. Lock the doors. I went inside. The fluorescent lights were too bright. made everything look washed out and sick. A few people were inside, loading up baskets with whatever they could grab. The clerk behind the counter looked about 60, gray beard, Cardinals cap, completely calm. "You got bottled water?" I asked. "Sold out 20 minutes ago." "Shit. Got Gatorade. Got pop. You want pop?" "Yeah, whatever you have." He started loading bottles into a bag. His hands were steady. That bothered me more than anything else that morning. How steady his hands were, like this was just another Saturday rush. "You drink any river water?" I asked him. "Me? No. I drink Bud Light." He smiled, gaps in his teeth. "They say how long before it clears?" "They don't know." "Figures. Government never knows shit." Behind me, someone knocked over a display. I turned. A guy in a Carhartt jacket was standing in the aisle, swaying slightly. His eyes were dark. Not black yet, but dark. And his mouth was open, working soundlessly, like he was trying to form words around something blocking his throat. "Hey," the clerk said. "You okay, buddy?" The guy turned toward us. Water dribbled from his lips. I grabbed the bag and ran. Trevor had the passenger door open before I reached the truck. I threw the bag at him, jumped in, locked the doors. Through the gas station window, I could see the clerk backing away from the counter, hands up, as the Carhartt guy advanced. "Drive, Dad." I was already moving. We made it maybe 8 miles before the transmission finally gave up for good. Started with a grinding sound, metal on metal, then a lurch that threw us both forward against our seatbelts. The truck coasted to a stop on the shoulder, engine still running, but the transmission completely disengaged. No, I said, turning the key off and on. Nothing. The truck just sat there, mocking me. "Can you fix it?" Trevor asked. "Not without a lift in about 6 hours. He looked at me, and I saw the fear he'd been hiding. Really saw it. My kid, who'd been trying to act tough this whole time, who'd been holding it together while we ran for whatever the fuck was happening back at the marina, was terrified. And I'd brought him out here. I'd insisted he come this weekend, even though Denise had said maybe he should skip it. Maybe with money tight and me living on a houseboat, it wasn't the best environment. But I'd wanted him here because these weekends were all I had left. "We'll walk," I said. "Highway can't be more than a mile." What if he stopped? What if what? What if we already drank it? The water. What if it's already in us? I wanted to tell him that was impossible, that we were fine, that his old man would figure this out the same way I'd figure out how to replace a head gasket at 19, how to wire a bilge pump, how to keep a houseboat afloat on a shit budget and even shittier luck. But I couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. "Then we deal with it," I said. "Together." "Okay." He nodded, blinking fast. We grabbed what we could carry. The Gatorade, some beef jerky I'd had in the glove box, my toolbox because I couldn't leave a $150 toolbox on the side of the road, Trevor's backpack. Started walking. The land here was flat bottom land, prone to flooding, mostly used for soybeans. Fields on both sides, stretching toward the tree line where the river ran hidden behind cottonwoods and willows. The sky had gone the color of old concrete, low clouds threatening rain. Rain would be bad. Rain meant more water, more contamination, more ways for whatever was in that river spread. We'd been walking maybe 10 minutes when I heard the drone. High up, military. I could see it now, a big surveillance drone, the kind they used in Iraq. It was flying a grid pattern over the river, back and forth, methodical. "They're watching," Trevor said. "Good. Maybe they can actually do something." But I didn't believe it. If they could do something, they would have done it already. Instead, they'd evacuated towns, set up roadblocks, and sent in drones to watch people walk into the river. My phone buzzed. Text from Denise. "Is Trevor with you? Please tell me he's not near the river." I typed back. "He's with me. We're okay. Heading inland." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I'm in Belleville. Come here. Both of you." Belleville was an hour north on a good day. Today, with roads blocked, And everyone evacuating? Could be 3 hours. Could be never. We'll try, I sent back. The highway wasn't far now. I could see semis rolling past, an endless convoy heading north. Good. Traffic meant evacuation routes were still open. Meant we could get a ride, get the hell away from this river and whatever it was doing to people. Then Trevor stopped. Dad. He was looking at his hands. His fingernails were dark. Not black, not yet, but dark. Like someone had run a Sharpie under each one. It's dirt, I said. Just dirt from the truck. It's not dirt. He held them up. The darkness was spreading, creeping up from the nail beds into the pink flesh of his fingers. Trevor. I drank some, he said. His voice cracked. Last night, I was thirsty and I didn't want to wake you, and I drank from the tap. Just a glass. Just one glass, Dad, I swear. I grabbed him, pulled him close. He was shaking. Okay, I said. Okay, we'll figure it out. We'll get you to a hospital. They'll pump your stomach or... You think they can fix this? He pulled back and his eyes were wet, but not black. Not yet. Thank God, not yet. You really think anyone knows what to do? Honestly? No. I didn't think anyone had a clue. This was something new, something we'd never seen before, some fucking experimental solvent that turned people into walking corpses who drowned themselves in the river that had poisoned them. But he was my kid, my only kid, and I'd be damned if I give up on him. Yes, I said. I think they can fix it, and we're going to get you there. A car pulled up behind us, an old Buick, maybe 90s primer gray. The window rolled down and a woman leaned out. She was maybe 60, silver hair, cross necklace. The kind of person who baked cookies for church sales and knew everyone's business. You boys need a ride? She asked. Yes, ma'am, I said. We're trying to get to Belleville. I'm going to Waterloo. I can take you to the highway junction. That'd be great. We climbed in the back. The car smelled like cigarettes and air freshener, that fake pine scent that always makes me think of dentist offices. She had a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror, swaying as we drove. You coming from the river? She asked. Brussels, I said. Lord have mercy. She made the sign of the cross with one hand, kept driving with the other. They're saying it's the end times. Revelation. Water turned to blood. It's a chemical spill, I said. Chemicals don't make people do what they're doing. That's demons. Pure evil. I didn't argue. Let her think it was demons if it helped her cope. Meanwhile, Trevor was staring at his hands, watching the darkness spread. We made it maybe 3 miles before we hit the roadblock. National Guard, 2 Humvees parked across both lanes, soldiers in full gear. They had their rifles ready, not pointed at us, but ready. One of them waved us to stop. The woman rolled down her window. What's going on? Mandatory evacuation, ma'am. You'll need to continue north on alternate routes. Highway 3 is closed. Why? Can't say, ma'am. Just following orders. Behind them, I could see smoke rising from the direction of the river. Black smoke, the kind that comes from burning buildings or vehicles. The kind that means something has gone completely to shit. Trevor, I said quietly, put your hand in your pockets. He did. The soldier leaned down, looked in the back seat. His eyes moved over us, professional, assessing. Then he saw Trevor's face. Trevor's eyes were changing, the whites going gray, then darker, spreading inward like ink in water. Sir, the soldier said, I need you to step out of the vehicle. We're fine, I said. We're just trying to get to... Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle right now. The woman was staring at Trevor in her rearview mirror. Her hands tightened on the wheel. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I said. We need to get out. Yes, she said. Yes, you do. We got out. The soldier gestured us away from the car, toward the side of the road. The woman drove away fast, tires squealing. Son, the soldier said to Trevor, have you had any contact with river water? Trevor looked at me, then back at the soldier. Then he nodded. When Last night, I drank some. I didn't know. How much? A glass. Maybe 8 ounces. The soldier spoke into his radio, voice low. I caught fragments. Confirmed exposure, symptomatic, need medical evac. Another Humvee pulled up. 2 soldiers got out, carrying what looked like a stretcher. No, not a stretcher. A containment unit. A fucking body bag with windows. The hell is that? I said. Sir, we need to transport your son to a quarantine facility. Like hell you do. He's coming with me. Sir, he's been exposed to a class 4 biohazard. For his safety and yours. He's my son. I understand that, sir, but... Trevor grabbed my arm. His eyes were almost completely black now. Dad, I can hear it. Hear what? The river. I can hear it calling. They zip-tied my hands behind my back and put me in the second Humvee while they loaded Trevor into the containment unit. I could see him through the window, his face pressed against the clear plastic, eyes like holes punched in paper. He wasn't fighting them, wasn't even resisting, just staring at something I couldn't see. This is bullshit. I yelled at the soldier in the driver's seat. Young guy, couldn't be more than 25, jawline that probably made him popular with the local girls. He's 17 years old. He's sick. He needs a hospital. We're taking him to a hospital, sir. Where? Can't say. Can't or won't. He didn't answer. Just started driving, following the first Humvee that had Trevor. We headed north, away from the river, through countryside I'd driven 1,000 times. Past the Hardys where Trevor used to love getting breakfast after early morning fishing trips. Past the John Deere dealer where I'd bought a used mower back when I still had a lawn to mow. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Like the world hadn't just ended. Like my kid wasn't turning into something that wanted to walk into the river. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Couldn't reach it with my hands tied, but I could feel it vibrating against my leg. Probably Denise, asking why we weren't there yet. What was I supposed to tell her? That I brought our son to the river and poisoned him? That I'd made coffee with contaminated water and let him drink from the tap because I was too cheap to keep the tank filled? We pulled into what looked like a high school. Football field converted to a landing zone, helicopters coming and going. Soldiers everywhere, moving with that purposeful urgency that meant they were scared but couldn't show it. Tents set up on the baseball diamond. People in hazmat suits. They unloaded Trevor first. I watched them wheel the containment unit toward the largest tent, could see him trying to sit up inside, hands pressed against the plastic. Fighting it now. Finally fighting. Let me see him, I said. Please, just let me see him. Can't do that, sir. Contamination protocols. He's my fucking son. The soldier cut my zip ties. Sir, I understand you're upset, but the best thing you can do for your son right now is let the medical team work. What medical team? What the hell are they going to do? I don't know, sir. I'm just following orders. Orders. Everyone was just following orders while people walked into the river and my kid's eyes turned black, and somewhere upriver Bobby Krause was walking along the bottom, lungs full of poison, looking for something he couldn't name. I pushed past him and ran for the tent. Didn't make it far. 2 soldiers grabbed me, not rough but firm, and dragged me back. I fought them. Christ, I fought hard. Landed one good elbow that made somebody grunt, but there were too many and I was 43 with a bad back and a worse temper. They put me in a smaller tent, plastic chair, bottle of water I didn't touch. Told me to wait. Wait for what? Wait for my kid to turn into whatever Bobby Krause had become? Wait for them to tell me sorry, nothing we could do, he's too far gone? A woman came in maybe an hour later. Not military, civilian clothes, CDC badge clipped to her belt. She had that exhausted look people get when they've been working around the clock. Dark circles, hair pulled back, hands shaking slightly when she pulled up a chair. Mr. Bridger? I am Dr. Emma Reyes. I'm part of the crisis response team. Where's my son? He's being examined. We're doing everything we can. That's not an answer. She hesitated. Then, the chemical compound that spilled, we're still analyzing it. But what we know so far, it's not just a toxin. It's something that fundamentally alters how the body processes water. It creates a kind of dependency. The affected individuals are being drawn back to the water source. Like addiction, more like programming. Their bodies are trying to maintain equilibrium with a chemical compound, and that requires constant exposure. Can you fix it? Another hesitation, longer this time. We're working on a chelation protocol, something that might bind to the compound and allow the body to excrete it. But Mr. Bridger, she leaned forward, your son drank approximately 8 ounces of contaminated water about 12 hours ago. Most of our cases involve much less exposure. A few drops, incidental contact. Your son's concentration level is significant. How significant? She didn't answer, which was an answer. I want to see him. That's not possible right now. Then when... I don't know. I stood up. The chair scraped against the concrete floor, harsh and final. You people don't know anything, do you? You don't know what it is, you don't know how to treat it, and you sure as hell don't know if my kid is going to walk out of here or walk into the nearest goddamn creek. Mr. Bridger. No more bureaucrat bullshit. I'm a part supplier for Malton. I sell fuel injectors and starter motors. I live on a houseboat that leaks, and my ex-wife got the house and the good car, and I see my kid 2 weekends a month, if I'm lucky. That's my life. That's all I got. So don't stand there and tell me you're doing everything you can when you can't even tell me if he's going to live. She stood too. You're right. I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is that there are 63 confirmed cases in the last 18 hours. 41 of them walked into the river before we could stop them. The remaining 22 are in containment, and your son is the youngest. What happened to the others? The 41? We don't know. The river we can't find them. Sonar's picking up movement along the bottom, but when we send divers down. She trailed off. What? The divers don't come back up. At least, not the same way they went down. I felt my stomach turn over. Jesus Christ. The National Guard is establishing a cordon 50 miles from any major water source. No one in, no one out. This has to be contained. And if it can't be... She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much in too little time. Then we pray it can't survive outside the river system. Because if it can spread through groundwater, through rain... She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Someone knocked on the tent pole. A soldier, different one this time. Mom, the Bridger boy. He's asking for his father. I was moving before anyone could stop me. They'd set up the containment units in the gymnasium, rows of them, each one holding a person who'd drunk from the river. Most were adults, men and women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, a few teenagers. And at the end of the second row, Trevor. He was sitting up, back against the plastic wall, knees drawn to his chest. His eyes were completely black now, no white left at all. But he tracked my movement as I approached, turned his head to follow me. Dad. His voice was muffled through the plastic, but I could hear it. Still Trevor. Still my kid. I knelt next to the unit, put my hand against the plastic. He put his hand on the other side, matching mine. His fingers were dark, the discoloration spreading up past his wrists now, crawling toward his elbows like ivy. How you doing, bud? It hurts. Not like pain. Like something pulling. Like there's a hook in my chest, and it's pulling toward the river. The doctors are working on it. They're going to figure it out. Dad, he leaned closer. You need to let me go. What? To the river. You need to let me go. It wants me. It's calling and I can't. I can't fight it much longer. The hell I will. You don't understand. It's not just me. Everyone who drank it, everyone who touched it, we're all hearing the same thing. And it's getting louder. It's telling us to come home. That's the chemical talking. That's not you. Isn't it? His black eyes seemed to see right through me. You always said I belonged on the water, that I was a natural. Maybe this is where I was always supposed to end up. Trevor, stop. Remember when I was 8? That summer you taught me to read the current? You said the river was alive. You said if you listened close enough, you could hear what it wanted. I remembered. He'd been so small, wearing a life jacket 3 sizes too big, sun in his hair, laughing as I showed him how to watch for feeding fish. Back when Denise still came with us sometimes, back when we were still a family. That was a metaphor, I said. I didn't mean. I know what you meant. But Dad, I can really hear it now. And it's not angry. It's not trying to hurt us. It's just lonely. It's been carrying all this poison for so long, and now it finally has company. That's insane. Is it? You work on the river. You've seen what we do to it. All the chemicals, the runoff, the shit we dump in because it's cheaper than disposal. Maybe it's just talking back now. Maybe we finally gave it a voice. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was delirious, that the compound was affecting his brain. But looking at him, at the thing my son was becoming, I wondered if he was right. If maybe the river had been poisoned so many times, in so many ways, that this was just the tipping point. The moment it stopped being a victim and became something else. Dr. Reyes appeared beside me. Mr. Bridger, we need to move him. Move him where? We have a mobile treatment facility set up at Scott Air Force Base. Better equipment, isolation protocols. You're taking him away. It's the best chance he has. I looked at Trevor. He shook his head, slight but definite. No, I said. Mr. Bridger. I said no. He stays here, where I can see him. That's not your decision to make. The hell it isn't. He's my son. He's 17 years old, and he's my son, and I'm not letting you drag him off to some Air Force base where I'll never see him again. Sir, if we don't treat this aggressively, then he dies, right? That's what you're not saying. All these treatments, all these protocols, you don't actually know if any of it works. She didn't answer. Trevor pressed his hand harder against the plastic. Dad, let them take me. Maybe they can help. And maybe they can't. Maybe all they can do is watch you turn into something else while they take notes for their fucking research papers. Glenn. He used my first name, which he never did. I'm scared. I'm so scared and I don't want to die alone. That stopped me, because he was right. Whatever happened, whether the doctors saved him or the river claimed him, I couldn't let him face it alone. Okay, I said. Okay, but I'm coming with you. Dr. Reyes nodded. We can arrange that. They loaded Trevor into an ambulance, special containment ambulance, basically a mobile hazmat unit. I rode up front with the driver, a quiet guy who didn't ask questions, just drove. We headed north on roads that were mostly empty, past abandoned cars and roadblocks, past towns that looked evacuated or about to be. My phone finally had signal. Text from Denise. Where are you? I called her. She answered on the first ring. Glenn, thank God. Where's Trevor? He's with me. Denise, he drank the water. Silence. Then how much? A glass. Last night. He didn't know. Oh God, Glenn, you said he'd be safe. I know what I said. My voice cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. Where are you taking him? Scott Air Force Base. They have a treatment facility. I'm coming there. Denise. I'm his mother, Glenn. I'm coming. She hung up. I stared out the window at the Mississippi River running parallel to the highway, brown and eternal, carrying its poison south toward Memphis, toward Vicksburg, toward New Orleans and the Gulf. How many people had drunk from it? How many were hearing its call right now? The driver's radio crackled. Containment breach at Winfield. Multiple subjects entered the water. Do not pursue. It's spreading, the driver said quietly. Yeah. You think they can stop it? No. He didn't argue. We reached Scott around 1,400 hours. I'd started thinking in military time without realizing it, like the crisis had rewired my brain. The base was locked down tight, armed guards at every checkpoint, helicopters overhead. They took Trevor straight to what looked like a converted hangar, rows of containment units inside, medical staff in full hazmat gear moving between them. I tried to follow, but they stopped me at the door. Family waiting area is Building 7, a nurse said. Someone will update you. I want to be with him. Sir, the contamination risk. I already had coffee made from the same water. If I'm going to turn whether I'm in there or out here. So let me be with my son. She looked at someone behind her. A doctor, older guy, gray beard visible through his helmet. He nodded. They suited me up, full hazmat, 3 layers, breathing apparatus, the works. Made me feel like an astronaut, bulky and slow and disconnected from reality. Then they let me in. Trevor's unit was in the back corner. They'd started in 4, running something clear into his arm. His eyes were closed, but open when I sat down next to him. Hey, Dad. His voice came through a speaker, tinny and distant. Hey, Boo. Denise coming? Yeah, she's on her way. He smiled, or tried to. His lips were dark now, too, almost purple. Good. I want to tell her I'm sorry. For what? For being such a shit when you guys split up. For taking sides. For blaming her when it wasn't her fault. Trevor. It wasn't anybody's fault, was it? Sometimes things just don't work out. Sometimes people grow apart, and that's okay. When he gotten so wise? When I had my kid, my boy who still left lights on and forgot to wash his dishes, figured out what it took me 3 years and a therapist to understand. Yeah, I said, that's exactly right. I love her, and I love you, even when you're being overprotective and paranoid. He grinned, and for a second he was just Trevor again, my Trevor, the kid who laughed at my bad jokes and helped me fix the bilge pump even though he'd rather be playing video games. Then the seizure hit. His back arched, slamming against the containment unit so hard I heard the plastic crack. The 4 tore loose, blood spraying against the inside of the barrier. Alarms shrieked and medical staff swarmed around us. But I couldn't move, could only watch as Trevor's body convulsed, as water, Christ water, poured from his mouth, his nose, his eyes, black and viscous like oil. Get him out, someone yelled. We're losing him. They opened the containment unit and pulled him free, laying him on the floor. Someone started chest compressions, but Trevor grabbed the guy's wrist, grabbed it with strength that shouldn't be possible, lifted the 200-pound medic like he weighed nothing, and threw him across the room. Then Trevor stood up. His eyes weren't black anymore. They were clear, perfectly, impossibly clear like glass, and I could see through them to something underneath. Something vast and old and hungry. Trevor, my voice sounded small inside the hazmat suit. He turned toward me, smiled, and when he spoke, his voice had harmonics, like multiple people speaking at once. He can still hear you, Trevor said. Not Trevor, the thing wearing my son's face. He's in here, drowning, and he's so afraid. Let him go, I said. Please, he's just a kid. We're all just kids to the river. All of you, playing with your boats and your bridges and your chemicals, never understanding what you're waking up. This was an accident. The barge, the spill. There are no accidents, only consequences. Trevor's hand reached out, fingers trailing darkness like smoke. Your species has been poisoning us for centuries. Did you think we wouldn't evolve? Wouldn't adapt? Wouldn't learn to use your weapons against you? Dr. Reyes was there suddenly, syringe in hand. Mr. Bridger, get back. No. She lunged forward and plunged the needle into Trevor's neck. He barely flinched, just looked at her with those clear, terrible eyes and said, that won't work. We're already in his cells, in his blood. He's ours now. Like hell he is. I grabbed Trevor's shoulders, my kid, my son, and pulled him close. Trevor, I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. Fight it. You're stronger than this thing. You're stronger than the river." For a moment, just a moment, the clarity in his eyes flickered. I saw brown. Trevor's brown, the color they'd been when he was born, when I held him for the first time and promised him I'd keep him safe. "Dad," he whispered. "Just him. Just Trevor." Then the water surged up from inside him, erupting from his mouth in a black torrent that hit me like a fire hose and sent me sprawling. My helmet cracked against the concrete, and suddenly I could smell it. The Mississippi, that thick organic rot smell of mud and dead fish and diesel fuel. The smell of home. Trevor walked past me, past the medical staff who scattered before him, toward the hangar door. Alarms were still blaring. Someone was screaming orders. Through my cracked helmet, I could hear helicopters, vehicles, the controlled chaos of a military base preparing for something they didn't understand. I got to my feet and followed him. Outside, the sky had gone dark, although it was only mid-afternoon. Storm clouds, thick and low, heavy with rain that would spread the contamination further. Trevor stood in the parking lot, face tilted up, arms spread like he was welcoming it. "Trevor." I ran toward him, clumsy in the hazmat suit. He turned. "Dad, you need to get away from here." "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." And there was Trevor in his voice again, real Trevor fighting through. "Because Mom's coming and she can't see me like this. She can't watch me walk into the water. You have to stop her, Dad. You have to make her understand that I'm already gone." "You're not gone. You're right here." "No." Water was running down his face now, pouring from his eyes like tears. "I'm in the river. I've been in the river since the first drop hit my tongue. This is just my body catching up." Behind us, I heard more commotion. Denise's voice, sharp and desperate. "Where is he? Where's my son?" "Go," Trevor said. "Please, Dad, don't let her see this." But I couldn't move. Couldn't tear myself away from my kid, my boy, the person I'd created and raised and failed to protect. Denise broke through the line of soldiers and ran toward us. She stopped when she saw Trevor, saw his eyes, saw the water streaming down his face. "No," she said. "No, no, no." "Mom." Trevor's voice was gentle. "It's okay." "It's not okay." "Glenn, what did you?" She rounded on me. "What did you let happen?" "I didn't. It wasn't." "He was with you. He was your responsibility and you." She was crying now, makeup running, hair wild, and I remembered why I'd loved her once, this fierce woman who would burn the world down for her child. Trevor moved between us. "Stop. Both of you stop. This isn't Dad's fault. It's not anybody's fault. It just is." "The doctors can fix this," Denise said. "The government, somebody—" "Nobody can fix this, Mom, because it's not broken. It's just different." "Trevor, I love you. Both of you. I'm sorry I won't graduate. Sorry I won't go to college or get married or give you grandkids. But I'm not sorry for this." He gestured at himself, at the water, at the sky. "Because for the first time in my life, I understand. I'm part of something bigger. Something that was here before us and will be here after. And it's beautiful, Mom. It's so beautiful." Then he walked away. We tried to follow, but the soldiers held us back. Gently at first, then firmly when we fought. We watched him cross the parking lot, walk through the gate, head toward the river that ran a mile south of the base. Watched until he disappeared into the tree line. They found his body 3 days later, or what was left of it, tangled in a winged dam near Cape Girardeau. The autopsy report said his lungs were full of water, Mississippi River water, contaminated with the compound from the barge spill. Said he'd been dead for approximately 72 hours. Said there was no way he could have walked that far, that the timeline didn't make sense, that something about the tissue decomposition was wrong. They sent me the report along with his personal effects. His wallet, his phone, his Grizzlies hoodie. I kept the hoodie, burned everything else. Denise and I met for coffee exactly once after the funeral. We sat across from each other in a Starbucks in Belleville. surrounded by people who hadn't lost anything, who were ordering lattes and checking their phones and living normal lives. "I don't blame you," she said. "I want to. God, I want to blame somebody." But Trevor was right. It wasn't anybody's fault. Does it make it hurt less? No, it doesn't. We didn't talk much after that. Couldn't figure out what to say. What do you tell the person you used to love when the thing you made together is gone? I moved off the houseboat. Couldn't stand being near the water anymore. Took an apartment in Edwardsville, got a job at a hardware store because the marine parts company went under. Turns out a lot of people stopped working on the river after what happened. The CDC eventually declared the Mississippi safe again, said the compound had broken down naturally, said people could resume normal activities. But they're lying, or they don't know, because I drive past the river sometimes on my way to work, and I can see them down there in the water. Not floating, not swimming, walking, along the bottom, in the deep channels where the tows used to run, hundreds of them, maybe thousands by now, moving south in a slow procession toward the Gulf. I see Trevor sometimes too, or I think I do, just for a second in my peripheral vision, standing on the bank or moving beneath the surface. His eyes clear like glass, reflecting light that shouldn't be there. The river took my son, took him and made him part of something I don't understand and can't fight. And some nights, most nights if I'm honest, I think about that glass of water he drank. Think about the coffee I made that morning. Think about how close I came to joining him down there in the dark, walking on the bottom, listening to whatever the river has to say. Sometimes I wonder if he's happy. Mostly I just wonder if he's still Trevor at all. The dream started about 6 months ago. Always the same. I'm standing on the bank, watching the water flow past, brown and eternal. And Trevor walks out of it, dripping, smiling, and reaches out his hand. "Come on, Dad," he says. "It's not so bad once you get used to it. And I'm so lonely down here. Please, just take my hand." I never do. Not yet. But every morning I wake up and my mouth is dry and my sheets are damp, and I think about that houseboat, about the river, about my kid walking along the bottom of the Mississippi. And I think about how thirsty I am. How I'm always thirsty now. How the tap water tastes wrong and the bottled water tastes wrong, and the only thing that sounds good anymore is the river, the real river, straight from the source. My fingernails have been dark for 2 weeks now. I haven't told anybody. Emergency alert. Mississippi River remains closed to recreational activities. Consumption of river water prohibited. If you experience unusual thirst or discoloration, seek immediate medical attention. Emergency alert. New cases reported in Cairo, Memphis, Helena. Quarantine zones expanding. Do not approach the water. Emergency alert. If you see someone entering the river, do not attempt rescue. Contact local authorities immediately. The alerts keep coming. Nobody listens anymore. The river is patient. The river can wait.